Happy Sunday, everybody. Steve here. So, the book of Ecclesiastes is it's a little what's the word I'm looking for? Not tricky, but it can be confusing sometimes. And I remember the first times I've read that. You come out of the book of Proverbs, and there's some like clear wisdom and do this and don't do this, and Ecclesiastes is a little more. It looks like the day, toward the end of Solomon's days, and he was a little jaded about things, and it's tough to kind of get your mind around it. In particular, I was reading a devotional that I have here, the Martin Luther devotional, Faith Alone, and he talks about Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2. Meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Look at that. You're like going, holy smoke. Boy, talk about going through life thinking like that. And so, again, Luther in this devotional is talking about that. He says, if you look at that, and it looks like he's condemning, the world in total. He's just going, what's the point of it all? This is that, and none of this stuff matters. But then you get to like chapter 5 and verse 18. And this is what he says here. And he says, this is what I observed to be good, that it is appropriate for a person to eat, to drink, to find satisfaction in their toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of life God has given them. For this is their lot. Moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift of God. They seldom reflect on the days of their life because God keeps them occupied with gladness of heart. Well, that doesn't sound like meaningless, though, does it? And Luther in this particular devotion talks about that. Well, if you look at this, it looks like it's diametrically opposed. Like, what did he change his mind? What's going on there? And his point was the meaningless thing is he's not talking about the things God has created or blessed us with. He's talking about people's evil tendencies and desires to misuse those things of God. And he says, I'll read a little bit here, these twisted tendencies and human strivings are what the author is condemning in this book, not the things themselves. And like I said, later in Ecclesiastes, he says, nothing is better than for people to be happy, making their lives pleasant by eating, drinking, and finding joy in their work. The author would be contradicting himself if he condemned these same things in this passage. Instead, he's only condemning the misuse of these things, which comes from having a wrong attitude. Some foolish people haven't understood this very well and have taught nonsensical ideas about hating the world and avoiding anything to do with it. But living alone or isolating ourselves from others doesn't show the proper contempt for the world. Neither does throwing money away or refusing to touch it show the proper contempt for money. Those who live surrounded by what the world has to offer and yet don't become attached to those things are the ones who display the proper attitude. So I kind of call these thoughts today, in it, not of it. So we're in the world, we're not of the world. The temptations of this world, the temptations that come along, we're to resist those. And it's really interesting to me. Again, I'm kind of a history fan, and what really made me appreciate history is it's not just reading it, going, is to just imagine myself picked up, brought over, and set down in that time, and how would I think? How are those people shaped by these things? And reading this devotional, there's a lot of things in there. Martin Luther came up in the Catholic Church, and he had been a priest in the Catholic Church and had a lot of problems with the things at the time that the Catholic Church taught. and broke away from it. Of course, that was the beginning of the Protestant Reformation, or the beginnings of it. But he talks a lot in here about that, of like the monk lifestyle of cloistering yourself away, to get away from all the world and the temptations and everything else. And we certainly are to flee temptation, but I mean, and we pray for strength, but to take ourselves away from the world is not right either, I think. And as I look through the scriptures, I see that. I remember when I was going through pilot training, and we had a small apartment there in Del Rio, Texas. And Nathan was just a little guy. I mean, he was just starting to he wasn't even walking yet, but we had one of those little walker things on the wheels, and he could get around in that thing pretty good, and he would get into everything. That boy, he still has a very inquisitive mind, and likes to, explore things and look at things. But he was certainly that way as a baby. He was fascinated with the VCR, and that thing was a temptation to him. And he would get in that thing. Of course, he'd walk up to it. And, at the time, there was no, I'm trying to think if there were movie DVDs at that time. Maybe that was just coming out. Anyway, we had a VCR, and we would put tapes in and watch movies. And, there would be little toys and stuff in there, because Nathan he just thought it was fascinating. It was the little flap, and then he would put something in there, and we'd catch him all the time, and it was just like, it was intoxicating for him. He just couldn't resist it, that temptation. And I mean, the only other solution is to take the VCR out of the room, and we just have to keep an eye on him, and and try to teach him to stay away from it. So, it seems like the simple solution is just to cloister ourselves, to just remove ourselves, to move out into the woods and have nothing to do with anything anymore, right? And I don't think that that's the intent. I certainly don't think that that's what God intends. And Paul in 1 Corinthians 5, verse 9, he was writing to the Corinthians talking about sin in their midst. And apparently, looking at this, I suspect that somebody took it a little bit too far, because he said, "I wrote to you in my letter," in verse 9, "not to associate with sexually immoral people, not at all meaning the people of this world who are immoral, or the greedy, and the swindlers, or idolaters. In that case, you would have to leave this world." And so he's telling them, look, I'm not telling you, not to associate with the people. I'm talking about the people that profess to be Christians in your midst, that aren't trying to escape that sin and get away from that sin. Not to be in the midst of you. I'm not telling you that to avoid all the people in the world at all, because I mean, you'd have to leave the world. I mean, you can't. How do you avoid them? And so there's that. And then, it's just what Jesus said about temptation as well, when he was in Matthew 13, verse 22. He was explaining the seeds of the sower. And the seed that fell among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. So, I mean, you're around it. Solomon in Ecclesiastes says, it's good that God blesses you with these things to enjoy them and enjoy life and to be in the world, but not to be get caught by it, not to get caught by that temptation of that VCR on the table, and you want to, and we're in it. Don't let the cares and the temptations of this world choke out our Christian life. And the last little thing I'll leave you with too, in Matthew 5:14, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. So if we cloister ourselves and go hide, I mean, isn't that what he was talking about hiding a lamp under a bushel? You know, we're to be the light of the world, the people out there for people, us to be seen, and people to go, what is it about this person and their life? You just have to avoid the temptations of the world, and that's the challenges, and that's where our prayer comes in, and that's where we look to the Lord. So I just, sometimes I certainly feel that way. Sometimes you just get a little disheartened by some of the things you see in this world, and you're just like, I just want to just get away from it all and go someplace and escape it all. And I just don't think that that's what God intends. I just believe that. I mean, we're to be in the world, not of it. So I hope this was helpful. It helps me wrap my mind around things doing these lessons. So hope you have a great Sunday, and we'll see you next time. Over and out.